gentlemen, ladies. Um, Thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference organized by the International Institute of Social Studies of the Erasmus University and with EFSAS as one of its co-organizers. I will mostly focus on Chinese influence in the region of South Asia, covering an area of almost 2 million square miles and home to over a quarter of the world's population. The region of South Asia has been ridden with violent interethnic conflicts, long-running devastating wars, and violent extremism. As a result, common people have witnessed impoverishment, deprivation, anguish, and death. Currently, the presence of China in the region, under the banner of its Belt and Road Initiative, which aims at connecting Beijing with the rest of the world in the pursuit of global economic, social, and political influence, poses numerous questions in regards to how this colossal multi-trillion endeavor will impact the stability of the already fragile Indian subcontinent. China's game of loans in South Asia has been perceived in many ways and by many analysts as an alternative development opportunity, a debt trap, a neo-colonist policy, and even worse. For the purposes of addressing these concerns, in my presentation I will use the example of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan as a case study, while also further paying attention to China's objectives in the Indian Ocean and the wider region. I think now, after more than 4 years since the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, also known by its abbreviation CPEC, which a dear friend and noted scholar Christine Fair has translated as colonizing Pakistan to enrich China, has officially commenced, it is high time for an assessment on how Pakistan and China have managed so far to advance this ambitious 15-year project valued currently at more than $62 billion. Harish mentioned that and about the electric power projects. The electric power projects constitute the largest share of the CPEC portfolio in terms of cost, since Pakistan experiences its greatest deficiencies in this sector. Around $30 billion worth of energy infrastructure is planned to be constructed by private consortia, and up to 15,000 megawatt of energy generating capacity will be brought in order to help alleviate Pakistan's chronic energy problems, which regularly amount to over 4,500 megawatt. Since the responsibility for the majority of the energy projects falls on Chinese companies that have taken over the engineering, procurement and construction of them, the necessary power equipment will be imported from China, for which Pakistan will have to pay. According to the Pakistani Bureau of Statistics, in the first 5 months of 2018 fiscal year, the import of power generation machinery stood at $1.4 billion. Pakistan's pursuit of electricity exhibits the collective irrationality and precipitance of its Pakistani contractors, since its electric power shortfall might diminish in the upcoming years. Yet it will be much more expensive compared to regional competitors, and it will burden the country with unbearable expenditures. The CPEC security surcharges added to the electricity bills of Pakistani consumers will make the new electric power even more costly. There are also major disparities considering the financing of these energy projects. First, many of them are funded by loans from China and are not actual investments, which will obstruct Pakistan's ability to pay back. Additionally, the interest rates charged by the China Development Bank and the China Exim Bank reveal that with an estimated debt-equity ratio of roughly 80 to 20% and investments guaranteeing a 17 to 20% rate of return on their equity, China could recover its investment in less than 3 years, while burdening Pakistan for at least the upcoming quarter of a century. Not only that, such hugely expensive electricity could paralyze Pakistan's already fragile economy. Currently, Pakistan owns $6.7 billion in commercial loans to China that need to be repaid in the following 3 years, which is more than double the amount it owes to the IMF. Official data shows that foreign direct investment from China went down by 77% this fiscal year, most likely due to Pakistan's inability to repay back its earlier loans. The Chinese master plan conceives a picture where the majority of Pakistani socio-economic sectors are deeply penetrated by Chinese companies and Chinese culture. Thus, Islamabad puts itself at risk of facing its finances and societal structure experiencing a colossal wreck. The combination of high upfront tariffs, interest rates, and surcharges will complicate Pakistan's effort to repay its loans, forcing the state to increase its domestic and export prices, making it thereby difficult to compete with neighboring and other countries which maintain lower prices. This current scenario in Pakistan draws quite striking parallels with China's involvement in Sri Lanka. The previous speaker talked about it. The construction of the Hambantota deep sea port in Sri Lanka was almost entirely funded by China. When it was opened in 2010, it was seen as a beneficial investment by Sri Lanka, which suffered greatly for more than 25 years of civil war and unrest, and was eager to develop its industry and economy. However, the port was unable to attract the maritime traffic needed to kickstart profit, which would in turn be used to pay back the Chinese loans plus the high interest rates. Eventually, in July 2017, Sri Lanka formally signed away the port's commercial activities to the state-owned China Merchants Port Holdings on a 99 years lease. The China Merchants Port Holdings further holds a 70% stake in the joint venture, the rest being owned by the state-run Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Hence, the debt trap Sri Lanka has found itself could and perhaps should provide some useful lessons for Pakistan. First, CPEC might come at the expense of national sovereignty and independence if Islamabad does not carefully review the financial agreements it abides to. Second, the imposition of China's terms and conditions cannot be interpreted as a win-win situation. The Gwadar port deal with the Chinese and the Pakistanis vividly illustrates these claims, since the profits will be 91% in favor of China in the following 40 years. For 70 years of its history, Pakistan has heavily relied on foreign aid from international monetary agencies. However, this new marriage with China is questionable, as the debts it causes may crash Pakistan's financial system, consequently reducing it to a vassal state. Additionally, all the local markets have been flooded by low-cost Chinese products, resulting in the closure of many Pakistani businesses and small enterprises. Currently, the population of Pakistan is more than 200 million, with people in their 20s and 30s as a majority, which naturally means a large working age population. For many of these young people, CPEC might have in theory, but not in reality, appeared as a favorable possibility for finding a job. Both Pakistan and Chinese officials and media news outlets constantly give employment figures for different projects, yet none of these numbers are substantiated by any formal governmental agreement. Even ostensibly detailed reports of the CPEC actually provide no specific data on actual job figures, which is highly alarming considering the ongoing public resentment and suspicion among the Pakistani population regarding who is the de facto benefactor of the CPEC. There is also a scarcity of information on types of job that in theory will be created, what skills will be required, what their duration will be, which projects will be included, and what will be the amount of the salaries. Currently, the rate of unemployment in Pakistan stands at 5.8, 5.9%, which accounts for more than 3.5 million people of the population. Even if advertised CPEC job prospects are taken at face value, these are still nowhere near to satisfy the overall demand. In addition to that, the immigrant Chinese labor force has taken many of those jobs, and Pakistan's government has confiscated land of locals in Gilgit-Baltistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Balochistan under the pretext of development and work placements. As a result, the local population suffers numerous human rights violations, with Baloch nationalists fearing that the influx of Chinese workers and nationals could potentially turn the demographic balance of the region against them. This was visible from the 2018 November attack on the Chinese consulate in Karachi by militants from the Baloch Liberation Army, which is one of the many separatist insurgent organizations active in Balochistan that have taken up arms against the Pakistani state since the mid-1970s for unfairly exploiting the province's resources, especially its natural gas and minerals, and for crushing dissent, and by some claims, by resorting to extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. Now these outfits have also turned their anger against China, accusing it of conspiring to take over Baloch lands covertly. Baloch insurgents organizations believe that the Pakistani military is colonizing their province with the help of China, turning them into a minority in their own province. Faced with this reality, it would be in China's own interest to convince Pakistan to consider a political solution to the Baloch issue and infinitely a more humane approach to engage with the Baloch people. It is, in my opinion, only reasonable to expect the Baloch to desire to have a say in how and where external investments are utilized in their province. The infrastructural development happening without any local involvement has created a number of dissatisfaction and tension among indigenous people. As earlier mentioned, the growing bonhomie between China and Pakistan has brought about a growing number of Chinese nationals immigrating to Pakistan. As of November 2018, 20,000 Chinese nationals reside in Pakistan, and this number is estimated to grow in correlation with the development of the CPEC. Apart from Balochistan, in other parts of South Asia, similar violent clashes between Chinese employees working on BRI projects and locals have also erupted. A recent case of June 2019 describes the deadly mass brawl which took place at a construction site of a China-funded power plant in Bangladesh, where reportedly a Bangladeshi worker fell to his death and Chinese authorities attempted to cover up the incident. In another case, in Pakistan in April 2018, Chinese workers engaged in the construction of the M4 motorway from Bahawalpur to Faisalabad attacked policemen deployed for their own security. Organized crime rings on both sides of the border have also been taking advantage of this new China-Pakistan friendship by exploiting the high demand for women in China and the appalling situation of women from marginalized communities in Pakistan. Illegal marriage centers set up by both Pakistani and Chinese matchmakers have been luring women, primarily from Pakistan's Christian community, into marriages with supposedly good Christian Chinese men. Testimonies show that after marrying in Pakistan and moving to China with their new husbands, brides are treated violently, oftentimes isolated by the husbands, and in many cases sexually exploited. There was a recent study on this in the Pakistani newspaper Dawn, I think a few months ago. In April, Human Rights Watch released a report urging Pakistan and China to take action against the cross-border marriage organized groups and issue of bride trafficking. The following month, Pakistani authorities cracked down on such a group in the Punjab province. Pakistan's Federal Investigation Agency conducted the investigation and arrested 8 Chinese nationals as well as 4 Pakistani nationals. Such cases make it evident that the relations between Chinese and Pakistanis do not always reflect the one that Beijing and Islamabad would like the people to believe. Although the multi-billion development game-changer plan was seemingly established for the purposes of fostering trade and people-to-people contact, in reality the foundation of this project is settled in very murky waters. It is also essential to discuss the legal background of the CPEC in order to examine claims that the building of the corridor is de facto in contravention of international law, and Pakistan is virtually perhaps selling out territory to China which does not belong to it under the rubric of infrastructural development. The previous speaker mentioned that CPEC is passing through the region of Gilgit-Baltistan, which is part of the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which does not fall within the jurisdiction of the Constitution of Pakistan. Despite the fact that the people of Gilgit-Baltistan are heavily affected by the creation of this economic corridor and have opposed it, they have been entirely excluded from any say in this project, indicating that China does not take their opinion very seriously. In addition to that, owing to the building of the corridor, the region has been facing serious environmental issues, including climate change, due to air and water pollution, inadequate waste disposal, natural resources depletion, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, and the melting of glaciers. With regard to Jammu and Kashmir, the origins of this new partnership between China and Pakistan can be traced back to the border agreement of 1963 signed between Chinese Foreign Minister Shen Ji and Pakistani Minister of External Affairs Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, which re-established the border between China and Pakistan. Based on this agreement, more than 5,000 square kilometers of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, known as the Shaksam Valley, and part of the territory of Baltistan was ceded by the Pakistani government to China for the construction of the Karakoram Highway. While administratively controlled by Pakistan since the First Kashmir War, Gilgit-Baltistan has never been formally integrated into the Pakistani state and does not participate in Pakistan's constitutional political affairs. In 2009, the Gilgit-Baltistan Empowerment and Self-Governance Order was passed by the Pakistani cabinet and later signed by the Pakistani President, Asif Ali Zardari. This order granted self-rule to the people of Gilgit-Baltistan by creating, among other things, an elected Gilgit-Baltistan Legislative Assembly and a Gilgit-Baltistan Council. And it's very important to understand this. By that order, Gilgit-Baltistan thus gained a de facto province-like status without constitutionally becoming part of Pakistan. Officially, there is a reason for that. Pakistan claims that it cannot integrate Gilgit-Baltistan into Pakistan as that would prejudice its international obligations with regard to the Jammu and Kashmir conflict. While legally, Gilgit-Baltistan continues to be an integral part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which is disputed, but to which Pakistan, strictly legally speaking, does not have any right over. In the case of Gilgit-Baltistan, what is happening is that the CPEC facilitates a third country's entry into territory long disputed between two other countries, and as such it's bound to only further complicate the dispute and impedes its resolution. China is not investing billions of dollars to simply withdraw. If any possible solution is found to the Jammu and Kashmir issue in the future, it will stay there and it will claim ownership by virtue of its heavy investment. Following Beijing's history of trade relations with African countries, it is also evident that China is very careful about its investments by initially adopting a very soft approach and thereafter being quite rigid in getting its money back. Islamabad might have signed the CPEC agreement believing that it would be advantageous to its country, but it actually subscribed to an unfair deal for which common Pakistanis will have to suffer. Although China advertises Pakistan as its brother and all-weather friend, the truth is that this friendship has always had an embedded, enduring imbalance. Pakistan is in China's debt, and the debt will only deepen. Furthermore, security concerns such as Chinese installations in Pakistan being attacked or Chinese workers in Pakistan kidnapped or killed in retaliation for Chinese treatment to Uyghur Muslims by any of the few dozen Islamic extremist and terrorist groups operating in Pakistan could additionally impose a strain on the relationship between the two countries. In June 2017, the so-called Islamic State militants, pretending to be police officers, kidnapped and killed 2 Chinese nationals in the Pakistani city of Quetta, the capital of Balochistan. The Islamic State has on numerous occasions declared a jihad against China on the grounds that Beijing is mistreating the Uyghur Muslim population. Curiously, I don't know whether people have heard the recent speech of Prime Minister Imran Khan at the UN General Assembly, but it's curiously Pakistan, which more than often acts as the guardian, or perhaps the self-proclaimed guardian, of the rights of Muslims across the world and raises slogans of championing Islam, has been conveniently turning a blind eye to the plight of Uyghur community in the Xinjiang province. The flaws in the Sino-Pak relationship will surface once the Chinese funding fails to lead to the anticipated returns for Pakistan and violent extremism and instability toward Beijing's initial projections. Such a scenario will not only be disastrous to Pakistan and China, but to the whole of South Asia. As illuminated through the case of Pakistan, China has embarked on supporting infrastructural projects in strategically located developing countries, which has been done by extending huge loans and not grants to governments, consequently leaving host nations entangled in a debt trap and vulnerable to China's influence. Looking closer at the rest of the Indian subcontinent, one recognizes the Indian Ocean as another scene of potential international confrontation. China, which is not a coastal state of the Indian Ocean, has invested billions of dollars not only in Pakistan but also in the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, in order to develop maritime hubs that could ensure its imported supply of energy fuels and raw materials, as well as its exports towards Europe and Africa. I'm getting a few
yes, I think maybe we can come down to more details of that in the questions, and
yeah, okay.
Because we would like to give a podium and
I will end. So I will skip a few things because I wanted to talk about the Maldives, but one of the moderators is looking very angrily to me, and I don't want to upset.
We want to leave some time.
Yeah, we have another event that
I don't want to upset anyone.
Yes.
So let me end by saying this, that the lack of transparency that surrounds the exact conditions of Beijing's deal-making process and the fact that China is running such a global project almost unilaterally are reasons for mistrust and worry, especially for developing nations. China is further creating a vacuum of silent power, which is supplemented by its efforts to mediate international conflicts, while countering any voice of criticism in regards to its own domestic issues. As America continues to evoke aid, pull out of agreements and constrict its relations, China seeps into these gaps. Unfortunately, the destiny of the states which have been lured into the dragon's fire of loans and debts looks grim for the economy, sovereignty, and for the future of the citizens of these countries. I will end there, and I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you.